Ever wonder what it really takes to build a business and a life that feels like yours? Welcome to That Big CEO Energy. I'm Callie, entrepreneur, operations whiz, and your go-to for the real, raw, and unfiltered side of business and life. Because let's be honest, entrepreneurship isn't just about strategy and success. It's about figuring out who you are in the messy middle, trying new things, well, just because you can, and creating a life that actually fits you. From solo deep dives to candid convos with powerhouse business owners, we're talking all about the highs and the lows and the why did no one warn me about this moments that come while chasing big dreams. So let's get uncomfortable, embrace the chaos, and make it happen. Hey there, welcome back. I'm really glad that you're here today because this is a conversation I think a lot of people need, even if they don't yet have the language for why. Today, we're talking about leadership, but not the kind of leadership that shouts the loudest, moves the fastest, or even takes up the most space. We're talking about quiet power. And if you've ever looked at the way that leadership is portrayed online and thought, well, I don't think I'm built for that. I'm like, I'm good at what I do, but ooh, I don't have that big of a personality. Or maybe you've even thought to yourself, like, listen, I'm not the kind of person that dominates a room, right? Like, I'm raising my hand to all three of those, but I want you to know something. That doesn't disqualify you from leadership. In fact, it may be the very thing that makes you a strong one. Because here's the thing, leadership doesn't have a personality type. It doesn't belong exclusively to the bold, the loud, or even the highly visible. Some of us, and some of the most grounded, profitable, sustainable leaders really aren't flashy at all. But they're steady, they're clear, they're thoughtful, they don't rush to perform. And so today I want to help you see that quiet leadership works and how it works and why it's often misunderstood and how to stop trying to lead like someone you're not. Because if there's anything I know about 2026 is I am not in the mood to do things that I don't want to do. So let's start with what most of us were taught to believe what leadership looks like. Leadership, according to the cultural scripts, is someone who walks into a room and immediately commands attention, right? They're confident, they're charismatic, they speak quickly, they have strong opinions and aren't afraid to show them, and they're decisive in a very visible way. And online, that gets amplified even more. Leadership becomes synonymous with constant output, high energy, daily visibility, always being on, always having something to say. So if you're someone who thinks deeply before speaking, if you prefer to observe before acting, if you don't feel energized by being the center of attention, it's easy to internalize the idea that somehow you're behind or like missing the boat on what exactly is supposed to be happening, or maybe that you need to change who you are to be taken seriously. And so what often happens next is subtle, but it's important. Instead of trusting your natural way of leading, what do? You start compensating, right? You push yourself to speak more than you want to. You overshare your thinking so people don't misinterpret your silence. You explain yourself constantly so no one assumes that you're unsure. Quiet leaders often end up working twice as hard just to prove that they belong. And the irony is this. The very qualities that make you measured, thoughtful, and intentional are the same qualities that create stability, trust, and long-term impact. Rewind and listen to that again if you need to hear it again. But one of the biggest misunderstandings about quiet leadership is the assumption that quiet equals passive. and it does not. Quiet leaders are not indecisive. They're deliberate. They're not unsure. They're discerning. And they're definitely not disengaged, but they're selective about where they place their energy. Does this feel like you? For most of us? And quiet power comes from clarity, not volume. A quiet leader doesn't need to fill the space with words to prove competence. They don't rush to respond just to show that they are involved. They listen. They process. And when they speak, it matters. The kind of leadership often feels uncomfortable in environments that reward speed over substance, but I don't know, but it thrives. It thrives in businesses and in teams that value trust, consistency, and clear direction. And so quiet leaders tend to build systems instead of spotlights, and they prioritize sustainability over spectacle. And most importantly, they make decisions that hold up over time, not just in the moment. And this is so important because quiet leadership is not something that you need to grow into by becoming louder. It's something that you step into by becoming more rooted in who you already are. So why do quiet leaders often over-explain? And here's where things get tricky, because many leaders don't struggle because they lack confidence. They struggle because they feel misunderstood. When you're not the most outwardly expressive person in the room, people sometimes project onto you. Like they assume that there's hesitation where there's actually thoughtfulness. And maybe they assume uncertainty where there's actually restraint. So to counter that, quiet leaders often over-explain. They narrate their thinking, they justify their decisions in advance, they soften boundaries so they don't come across as harsh. And this usually comes from a good place. A desire to be clear, a desire to be fair, a desire to keep things smooth, but over-explaining slowly erodes authority. The more you explain, the more you invite interpretation, the more you invite debate, the more your decision starts to sound like a proposal instead of direction. So quiet leadership becomes powerful when you realize this. Clarity doesn't require justification. You're allowed to make a decision and let it stand. You're allowed to be concise. You're allowed to trust that your presence doesn't need a running commentary. And let's talk about why this is so hard to practice, right? Because not explaining yourself can really leave you feeling exposed. It can feel like you're leaving space for people to misunderstand you. And it can feel like, I don't know, you're being evaluated without somehow defending your position. But for many people, especially those socialized to be accommodating or agreeable, silence feels super, super risky. And it feels like disapproval. And it feels like tension. So what do? We rush to fill it. But hear me when I say this. Leadership is not about managing everyone else's emotional response. It's about making clear, aligned decisions and holding them with steadiness. You don't need a universal agreement to lead well. And you don't need everyone to like your choice for it being the right one. And you certainly don't need to earn permission for decisions that fall within your role or responsibility. Because quiet power shows up when you stop trying to preempt every possible reaction and start trusting your own judgment. That trust is felt even when it's not loudly announced. So, how do you actually practice this? Well, first, Start paying attention to how often you add extra explanation that isn't really necessary, and notice when your clarity turns into cushioning. Second, practice concise communication. One clear sentence is often enough. Not cold, not dismissive, just very clean. And third, allow pauses. This is the rough one. Silence doesn't mean that you failed. It means that you're letting your words land. Like you're in an airplane. You've said what you needed to say. You stayed up in the air. And now it's time to come down and coast. Fourth, separate clarity from reassurance. It's okay to be kind. It's okay to be direct. Those things are not opposites. And finally, remember this. The people who respect you will respect your clarity. And the people who push back against boundaries would have done so regardless how gently you explained them. Your job is not to convince. Your job is to lead. And here's what I want you to carry with you after today, that leadership is not a performance. It's a presence. You don't have to be louder to be stronger. You don't have to be faster to be effective. You don't have to be flashier to be influential. Quiet power is real power. It's steady. It's grounded, and it creates room for others to feel safe, clear, and supported. If you've been exhausting yourself trying to lead in a way that doesn't fit, I hope that this gives you permission to stop, to speak when it matters, to decide with confidence, and to let your leadership be felt and not forced. I'll see you next time. Hey friend, thanks for hanging out with me today. If something in this episode clicked for you, I want you to shoot me a DM over on Instagram. The link is in the show notes. Let's chat about how you're making the messy middle work for you. If you loved what you heard, would you mind sharing this episode with a friend who needs to hear it too? And drop a quick review if you don't mind. It helps get the word out, and I appreciate it more than you know. Catch you in the next one.